For most people in the world, traveling to another country is not simple. Before they can board a plane, they must first deal with paperwork, visa applications, embassy appointments, and long waiting periods. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months, and sometimes, despite all the effort, the answer is still no. But there is one passport that turns this complicated process into something almost effortless. A passport that allows its citizens to travel to almost every corner of the world without needing a visa. A passport that immigration officers across continents recognize instantly. That passport belongs to the small Southeast Asian nation of Singapore. Today, the Singaporean passport is considered the most powerful passport on earth. It gives Singapore citizens access to more than 190 countries and territories without requiring a visa in advance. That means a Singaporean traveler can wake up one morning, decide to visit Europe, book a flight, and simply go. No embassy interviews, no long application forms, no anxious waiting, just a passport, a ticket, and a journey. But the real question is this: how did such a small country achieve something so powerful? Because Singapore is not a large country, it is not rich in natural resources, it does not have vast oil reserves like Saudi Arabia, and it does not have the massive population of countries like India or China. In fact, Singapore is one of the smallest countries in the world, yet somehow it holds one of the strongest passports in history. To understand how this happened, we have to go back to the beginning, back to a time when Singapore was not powerful at all, back to a time when many people believed the country would not even survive. In 1965, Singapore became independent after separating from Malaysia. But independence did not come with celebration. It came with fear. At that time, Singapore was a young nation facing enormous problems. The country had almost no natural resources. There was very little land. There was high unemployment. Housing was extremely limited. Many families lived in overcrowded conditions. On top of that, the population was divided among different ethnic groups, including Chinese, Malay, and Indian communities. Tensions between these groups created serious social challenges. To many outside observers, Singapore looked like a country destined to fail. Some economists believed the country would collapse within years. Others believed it would eventually become dependent on larger neighboring nations. But the leaders of Singapore had a very different vision. They understood something important. If Singapore could not rely on natural resources, it would have to rely on something else. It would have to rely on discipline, education, and trust. Instead of focusing on what the country lacked, Singapore's leaders focused on building something new. They began creating a system that would make Singapore one of the most efficient and organized nations in the world. Corruption was aggressively fought. Government institutions were strengthened. Public services were improved. And slowly the country began to transform. One of the most important decisions Singapore made was to build a government system that was extremely strict about corruption. In many countries, corruption weakens institutions and damages international reputation. But Singapore chose a different path. Government officials were held to very high standards. Public institutions were carefully monitored. Laws were enforced consistently. Over time, this created a reputation that became one of Singapore's greatest strengths. Countries around the world began to see Singapore as a place where rules mattered. Investors trusted the country. Businesses trusted the country. And eventually, other governments began to trust Singapore citizens as well. At the same time, Singapore invested heavily in education. Schools focused on mathematics, science, engineering, and technology. Students were encouraged to develop practical skills that could help the country grow economically. Universities produced highly trained professionals, engineers, scientists, business leaders, financial experts. These educated citizens became the foundation of Singapore's modern economy. And as Singapore's reputation grew stronger, so did the power of its passport. Because passports are not just documents, they are reflections of how the world sees a country. When a passport is powerful, it means other nations believe the citizens carrying that passport are trustworthy. It means they believe those travelers will respect local laws. It means they believe those travelers will return home after their visit. And that kind of trust takes decades to build. Singapore's transformation truly accelerated when the country focused on becoming a global center for trade and finance. Its location turned out to be one of its greatest advantages. The island sits near one of the busiest shipping routes in the world. Ships traveling between Europe, the Middle East, and Asia often pass near Singapore. Recognizing this opportunity, the government invested heavily in port infrastructure. Over time, the Port of Singapore became one of the busiest ports on Earth. Millions of containers move through the port every year. Goods from around the world pass through Singapore before reaching their final destinations. This made Singapore incredibly important to global trade. At the same time, the country developed its financial sector. Banks, investment firms, and multinational corporations began establishing offices in Singapore. The city quickly became one of the most important financial centers in Asia. Major global companies began sending employees to Singapore. International conferences were held there. Foreign professionals moved to the city to work. All of this strengthened Singapore's international reputation. And the stronger the country's reputation became, the more powerful its passport became as well. While Singapore citizens gained greater freedom to travel, many people in other parts of the world faced the opposite situation. Citizens from countries like Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq often struggle with strict travel restrictions. Their passports allow visa-free travel to only a small number of countries. In many cases, travelers must go through long visa application processes before they can even consider leaving their country. Sometimes they must prove their financial status. Sometimes they must attend interviews. And sometimes their applications are rejected without explanation. This difference highlights an important reality. The freedom to travel around the world is not equal. Some passports open doors. Others create barriers. And those barriers often reflect global politics, economic stability, and international trust. While Singapore was transforming its economy and strengthening its institutions, the country was also quietly building one of the most effective diplomatic networks in the world. Diplomacy does not always make headlines. It happens through meetings, negotiations, agreements, and long-term cooperation between nations. For Singapore, diplomacy became a powerful tool for survival. Because Singapore is a small country surrounded by larger neighbors, it could not rely on military strength to secure its position in the world. Instead, it focused on building relationships. Singapore joined international organizations, signed trade agreements, and maintained strong diplomatic ties with countries across multiple continents. The country became a member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, often called ASEAN, which helped strengthen cooperation with neighboring countries in Southeast Asia. Through ASEAN, Singapore built strong economic and political partnerships with nations such as Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. But Singapore did not limit its diplomacy to its immediate region. It also developed strong relationships with powerful countries such as United States, Japan, and Germany. These relationships were not built overnight. They were built gradually through decades of cooperation in trade, education, security, and technology. And every time a new agreement was signed, Singapore's international reputation grew stronger. Because when countries trust each other politically and economically, they are also more likely to trust each other's citizens. This trust eventually translated into visa-free travel agreements. Little by little, more countries began allowing Singapore citizens to enter without visas. One agreement after another, one partnership after another, until eventually, the Singapore passport became one of the most widely accepted travel documents in the world. Another factor that contributed to Singapore's powerful passport was the culture of discipline within the country itself. Singapore is known around the world for its strict laws and strong emphasis on public order. The country has some of the toughest regulations when it comes to cleanliness, safety, and public behavior. For example, littering can result in heavy fines. Vandalism is treated very seriously. Even small violations of public rules can lead to penalties. To outsiders, these laws sometimes seem extremely strict, but inside Singapore, they have helped create one of the most organized and efficient societies in the world. The streets are clean. Public transportation is reliable. Crime rates are among the lowest in the world. This environment shapes the behavior of citizens as well. Singaporeans grow up in a society where rules are taken seriously, where discipline and responsibility are part of everyday life. And when Singapore citizens travel abroad, they often carry that same reputation with them. Immigration officers, business partners, and universities around the world gradually began to associate Singapore travelers with professionalism and reliability. This reputation strengthened the global trust placed in the Singapore passport. Singapore also built one of the most respected education systems in the world. Students in Singapore consistently rank among the highest performers in international academic assessments. Subjects such as mathematics, science, and technology are heavily emphasized in schools. Universities in Singapore attract students from around the world. Institutions like the National University of Singapore and Nanyang Technological University have become globally recognized centers of learning and research. As a result, Singapore produces a large number of highly skilled professionals: engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs, technology experts. These individuals travel abroad for education, business, and innovation. They work in international companies. They collaborate with global teams. They represent Singapore in industries ranging from finance to artificial intelligence. Every successful Singaporean professional abroad reinforces the country's reputation, and every positive interaction strengthens the trust that other nations place in Singapore citizens. The ranking of passports is determined by how many countries a passport holder can enter without requiring a visa beforehand. These rankings are published each year by global mobility indexes that analyze international travel data. The Singapore passport consistently appears at the top of these rankings. That means Singapore citizens can travel to more destinations without visa restrictions than almost anyone else in the world. In comparison, passports from countries like Afghanistan often appear at the bottom of the rankings. Afghan citizens can travel visa-free to only a small number of countries. Citizens of Syria and Iraq face similar limitations. These differences are not simply about geography. They reflect deeper factors such as political stability, economic development, international relations, and security concerns. Countries that are stable and economically strong tend to receive more visa-free agreements. Countries facing conflict or instability often face stricter travel restrictions. Singapore's powerful passport is therefore not just a travel convenience. It is a reflection of decades of economic growth, political stability, and international cooperation. Today, the Singapore passport represents far more than the ability to cross borders easily. It represents the story of a nation that transformed itself. A country that began with almost nothing. A country that faced enormous challenges in its early years. And a country that chose discipline, education, and strategic planning instead of chaos and corruption. Through those choices, Singapore built one of the strongest reputations in the world. And that reputation is now carried by every citizen who travels with a Singapore passport. When immigration officers stamp that passport, they are not just approving a traveler. They are acknowledging decades of trust that Singapore has built with the world. And that trust is what makes the Singapore passport one of the most powerful documents a person can hold. Another reason the Singapore passport became so powerful is the country's enormous influence in global trade and transportation. Despite being a small island nation, Singapore sits at one of the most strategic locations in the world. Every day, thousands of ships pass through the waters near Singapore while transporting goods between Asia, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Because of this location, Singapore developed one of the busiest ports on Earth. The Port of Singapore handles millions of shipping containers every single year. Electronics, cars, oil, machinery, and countless other goods pass through this port before reaching different parts of the world. This massive trade activity has made Singapore one of the most important logistics hubs on the planet. But trade is only one part of the story. Singapore also built one of the most advanced airports in the world. The Singapore Changi Airport is widely recognized as one of the best airports anywhere. Millions of travelers pass through Changi Airport every year, connecting flights between continents. For many people traveling between Europe, Australia, and Asia, Singapore becomes a natural stop along the journey.
As international travel through Singapore increased, so did the country's global connections. Business leaders, investors, and professionals began traveling frequently to Singapore for conferences, negotiations, and partnerships. Global companies established their regional headquarters in the city. Banks, technology firms, and multinational corporations expanded their operations there. All of this strengthened Singapore's position as an international hub. And the more connected Singapore became to the global economy, the stronger its passport became. Because when countries depend on each other economically, they also begin to trust each other more. That trust eventually translates into easier travel. Visa requirements are reduced, travel agreements are signed, and the citizens of those countries gain greater freedom to move across borders. This is exactly what happened with Singapore. Over time, more and more nations allowed Singapore citizens to enter without visas. Each agreement expanded the power of the Singapore passport, until eventually it reached the top of the global rankings. Today, the Singapore passport is one of the most respected travel documents in the world. But its power is not just about how many countries Singapore citizens can visit. It represents something deeper. It represents the success of a country that chose discipline, planning, and cooperation over conflict and instability. Singapore started with very little. No natural resources, limited land, a small population. Yet through careful leadership, strong institutions, and global partnerships, the country built one of the most successful economies in modern history. And with that success came international trust. But the story of passport power is still evolving. As the world becomes more connected, mobility will become even more important. Countries that build strong economies, stable governments, and positive international relationships will continue to expand the freedom of their citizens. Those that struggle with instability may continue to face restrictions. Singapore's journey shows that even a small nation can achieve extraordinary global influence. It proves that reputation, trust, and long-term planning can be more powerful than size or natural resources. And every time a Singapore citizen opens their passport at an international airport, they are carrying a symbol of that achievement. A small booklet that represents decades of hard work, discipline, and global respect. If you enjoyed learning about how a tiny island nation created one of the most powerful passports in the world, then you're going to love the other stories we uncover on this channel. Because around the world, there are countries with hidden secrets, surprising histories, and incredible transformations that most people have never heard about. So if you're curious about how nations rise, fall, and shape the world we live in today, make sure you subscribe to Country Mystery and join us for the next story.